Good afternoon all, good to see you and thank you for joining us. We're going to talk through how to de-risk infrastructure design to ensure an efficient construction process. For those that don't know me, my name is Ryan Meade. I'm Head of Civils at Brookbanks and I'm joined by my colleague today, Toby Crayden, who's a Technical Director in the Civils team.
Hi all, hi.
We're going to talk through the common risks to infrastructure project delivery. That could be for residential, industrial, or major highway works. Show you how we mitigate those risks and give you an example of how Brookbanks has achieved this on a major development. So focusing on the challenge we have with major infrastructure schemes. Typically, the risk for these schemes is locked in early. This is due to decisions made at the early design or planning stages. They could be related to investigations, design decisions, or limited available information. These changes are normally very expensive and disruptive to either the project program or the cost plan for the development. And the best way to mitigate them is to understand them from the early stage and deal with them as they come about. We're going to focus on where the risks start. So this can impact the project program, the costs, or the credibility of the design team, as I said. So the focus today is on how we can mitigate that. These risks occur when there's gaps in the design. So when the designs are not tested against real-world constraints or buildability issues, if the designs are based upon assumptions rather than known facts, this could be in relation to infiltration rates or outfall levels, land ownership boundaries, or existing utility positions. Designs developed without seeing the site may also miss key constraints. A key one for this is access to the development. That could be right on the site boundary or the wider highway network. When design teams don't speak to key stakeholders early on in the process, it could be the lead local flood authority, talking to the highway authority or landowners and water authorities, ensuring that you've got their buy-in on the strategy you're taking forwards and that they support the proposals you're developing. When there's poor communication between the design team or with the site team, this can allow discrepancies into the design or delays during construction projects. We're now going to look at how best to mitigate these risks, taking each point in turn. So the first way of mitigating this risk is a detailed gap analysis. Brookbanks undertakes structured gap analysis processes to uncover any assumptions which have a high risk to the project success. This could relate to missing survey data, missing or limited site investigation results, which includes infiltration testing, making sure they're in the correct location and depths, understanding existing utilities, land ownership overlays, and then landscape and ecology surveys. So many of these things, such as ecology surveys, are also time dependent. You need to get these done at the right time of the year. Missing these windows can cause quite a lot of delays for the application process and construction work. Our process is to tabulate this information. We grade each assumption or missing piece of information in a traffic light system and make it clear to the client what these potential risks are. Where it's decided that there is a risk and it's too great a risk to the project, we can coordinate or instruct additional surveys and testing to close these gaps and provide clarity for the design team. One thing that's really important as part of the design process is a site visit. Looking at something in pictures or on Google Earth is not the same as visiting the site firsthand. Checking access restrictions, like I said, related to height, width, or weight of construction vehicles, making sure you've got clear routes into and out of the development. You can ensure safe access and mitigate any risk to the existing highways. Assessing ground conditions, inspecting ditches and existing culverts, making sure that you've got outfalls to ditches where you know where they're going. A big focus of the lead local flood authorities at the moment is ensuring we don't have what they call blind outfalls, where you're draining to a ditch with no known outfall beyond your site. Identifying service locations. If you're on site, you can spot signs of services, covers, overheads, or signage from utility operators, and then you can instigate surveys to establish the location and depth of these. You also got operational and safety challenges relating to services, gradients, and the access points, and a really good understanding of the site topography. There's nothing like standing on a site, understanding how the land falls, where it falls to. If you're going to have issues with access in the short term when you've got level differences from the highways to the land, and how that can be mitigated through the design process. All of these things inform the design team and ensure better design decisions are made throughout the process.
So I'm going to pick up the next few slides. So thanks, Ryan, for the first few. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon if you've already eaten your lunch. But I'll pick up the next few slides and then we'll talk about a real life example. So early stakeholder engagement. As we've already heard, it's all about preparing the groundwork. It's all pretty common sense stuff, but typically engineers are super keen to get stuck into engineering. The clue's in the name. But a good design, you'll be looking at what is going to be influencing that design. So talking to all of the stakeholders that will be involved throughout the whole project, getting engaged with them early. And at the end of the day, we're all influencers. I know that has a slightly different connotation nowadays, but we are and always have been influencers in a project, as is every other stakeholder, and quite rightly so. So typically we would put together what would have been known as a constraints plan, but equally as valid is an opportunities plan, an opportunity to tick everyone's box. So make sure you understand what the drivers are for each of the stakeholders in a project. Next slide, please. So contractor support during design. So this is a personal favourite of mine. It can take many forms, from thinking about the sequencing of a project, temporary works, how do you build on a boundary, utilities impact, or perhaps more importantly, how we impact on utilities. This is a team game. So effectively for every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So understand how a contractor might build a project out. What are his risks going to be? This is their daily job and they're very good at it. So use that experience and engage with a contractor as early as possible. If that's pre or during the design stage, then that's great. If it's at tender stage, we'll pick up the discussion at that stage, or if it's just shortly before they're going to be getting out on site, make sure that you've sat down and explained exactly what your thought processes were during the design process and what risks you foresaw and how you might help the contractor overcome some of those when he gets onto site. It's about having a partnership ethos with the contractor. It's something that you're going to be delivering together for the benefit of your joint and ultimate client to see the project successfully delivered. So like I say, meet the contractor as soon as possible, look them in the eye, shake them by the hand, and understand what might concern them before you actually get to site and start putting a spade in the ground and then uncovering problems at that stage. So next slide, please. Pre-start drawing reviews. So again, this is something which is quite often overlooked. It follows on from the early contractor involvement, but it could be with anyone with a stake in the project. That word again comes up, collaboration. It's going to be a common theme. If nothing else, make sure it's an internal review. Has anything changed since the design was done? Have standards changed? Anything changed on site? Team members might have changed, and they may have a different view or something to bring to the party that you can take on board. Is there anything in the marketplace now which does the job better than when you were looking at the design? So a lot of companies are bringing out innovative solutions to things like surface water storage, flow controls, etc. So since you did the design, that might have only been 6, 8, 10, 12 months ago. Is there anything in the marketplace now which you should be incorporating onto the project? And just make sure that your intent is clear and concise. So can the contractor understand exactly what you're expecting him to build, and not just on a screen or in a nice warm office, but when they're standing on site and it's windy and wet and you're up to your kneecaps in mud. Does it actually make sense, the information that you're handing over? And that goes not only for any engineering detail, but right down just to simple drawing clarity. And there's an example of that immediately on the screen. If you look to the left, you'll see we've got a screenshot, green line straight the way across a dimension, and it's a simple thing. It can be easily missed. But again, you know, the engineer that puts the drawings together will know off the top of his head what that dimension is meant to be. But a contractor will be looking at these for the first time in not ideal circumstances. So just make sure that everything is as clear and concise as it can be. Next slide, please. RFIs. So who doesn't hate an RFI? Well, guess what? The contractor doesn't like them either, because effectively an RFI means that there's a lack of clarity. There's some uncertainty, there's some missing information, there's been a change on site, change of circumstance. None of these are your friend. They're going to potentially impact on program, on cost, and you need a good RFI process to make sure that these things are ironed out as smoothly as possible. Identify the issues quickly, make sure there's that clear line of communication, and perhaps most importantly, agree some sensible response times. Some RFIs will demand or require near on instant decisions, perhaps on the phone, perhaps on an instant visit to site, but others perhaps not so much. And don't just lob all of the RFIs into the same sort of urgent category. You know, if something can wait until a little bit more research has been done, or parked until it's a more sensible time to review, then fine, do that. Do make sure that those RFIs that are urgent are dealt with very quickly, because a contractor will be looking to close these things out as quickly and seamlessly as possible. They just need to get on with the job. And so, yeah, an RFI process is necessary, but you can have a sensible RFI process. On to the next one, please. And pulling it all together. So effectively, as Ryan said earlier, it is all about that gap analysis. Site visits, so important. Ask questions. When was the last time that your designer's risk assessment or your drawing specifically asked a contractor to carry out a task to de-risk a project or an element of design? Drawings, as we mentioned before, need to be clear and concise. What's the point in having 20 standard notes that tell the contractor that what British standard to use if you don't tell them that, you know, there's a HV cable which is right next to the site, or you've spotted some potential issue in the site investigation which is buried on page 204. Bring that out, put it on the drawing, make it nice and clear. Again, it's all about that collaboration. Make sure that other design team members and the contractor and the client know exactly what assumptions you've based your design on, and whether you need anything clarifying before you get to site or before it goes on to that approval process. Again, we're all influencers, remember, so make sure you use that, and don't just seek to be good people to work with, but seek to be great people to work with. And that means helping in a collaborative way every member of the design team to the best of your ability. Moving on, I think we're going to move on to the example now, aren't we?
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Toby. So
Excellent.
I'm going to talk you through an example Brookbanks has been working on for a couple of years now. This is a major garden village scheme for a master developer. So the scheme has outline consent for 2,000 homes. It includes multiple schools, 2 local centres and open space areas. Brookbanks were approached to be part of a team instructed to refine and develop the overall strategy and consent for the scheme, to align it with the master developer approach and overcoming some of the site constraints which hadn't been fully investigated at the outline planning stage. The constraints for the development were quite significant. The site is hugely steep in many places, up to 1 in 4. This equates to a 40-meter level difference from one side of the development area to the other. There are a number of existing utilities within the site. The most important of these is an intermediate pressure gas main that runs from the high to the low side of the development. This meant that it needed to be considered in 2D and 3D. We needed to design around it in terms of offsets and safeguarding, but also where we're changing levels, ensuring that we're maintaining appropriate cover or not maintaining or not increasing cover to this asset. Ground conditions are also fairly tricky. There's areas of landfill on site that needed further investigation by a specialist, particularly in the phase 1 area of the development. So it was an early constraint for the scheme, which that needed to be rectified. There were 15 different landowners involved in the who have a piece of a parcel of land within the wider consented site. This meant lots of different opinions, lots of different desires for what they saw this development becoming and how they wanted it delivered. This also makes an interesting constraint on the phasing of the development, in trying to ensure that phases don't straddle competing ownership boundaries. And lastly, there was archaeological, ecology and arboricultural constraints as well. The site is littered with tree lines. Many of these trees are important or veteran trees that needed to be retained, which becomes particularly important when you're looking at a level difference like we've got, ensuring that when you are tying in levels that you're tying in before root protection zones and keeping those trees safe, and also making sure that they are tied into the development to enhance the scheme rather than just becoming left at the edges. So our approach follows the same process as we've outlined in this presentation. We undertook a site walkover with the client and the architect team to understand the scheme, assess what any opportunities we had and how we could improve the proposals. We undertook a detailed gap analysis. This identified the need for additional topo survey, particularly in areas of the outfall ditches. To achieve this, we needed to undertake vegetation clearance. So we had to coordinate with the ARB team, making sure we had this clearance undertaken at the right time of year, getting the surveyors in, coordinating the different landowners who had different existing uses for this land. So some areas were still farm, some areas had livestock in, and the movement of the survey teams throughout the development had to be coordinated with all the different landowners, which slowed things down and needed to be added into the programme. We also undertook a detailed GPR survey across the development. One of the things this flagged was that the assumed route of the gas main was slightly out, which impacted the master plan. So understanding this early was really important. The archaeology and ecology teams reviewed the information that was provided previously. There were areas due to vegetation or lack of access that hadn't been surveyed, or there was elements of the survey that were considered out of date. So both teams went out, undertook new surveys that were then used to inform the design. We met with lots of key stakeholders early on in the process. So we met with the Highways Authority, looking to agree design parameters for the highways, particularly the gradients of the highways, to mitigate some of the issues we had with the level differences. Looking at longitudinal gradients, looking at tie-ins to junctions, looking at how we tie into the existing highway to the south of the development. We met with the lead local flood authority. The outline strategy for this scheme was heavily reliant on attenuation tanks below ground, mainly due to the topography of the site. This isn't really in keeping with the latest guidance on SUDs, looking for open SUDs that provide amenity and other benefits to the site. So we worked with the LLFA to redesign the outline drainage strategy, keeping in mind things like the agreed discharge rates and discharge points, but really focusing on how those storage areas could be used to enhance the scheme rather than just be buried beneath open spaces. And then we also met with specialist contractors to agree the approach for the remediation of landfill areas. This was really important in de-risking the construction sequencing, trying to ensure that the phase 1 works could commence at speed. We weren't going to be slowed down by unexpected delays. This was coupled with the ground investigation team undertaking more detailed trialling and trenching. So we had a clear understanding of where this contaminated or made ground was and how best to deal with it. So the results of this were that we developed a robust master plan and site-wide levels and drainage strategies. This can be relied upon by the client for their cost plan, and it enables them to phase the development and scope out when it can deliver certain areas and key features for the scheme. It gave certainty on the adoptability of the highways and the drainage, because we'd liaised with the Water Authority, the LLFA, and the Highways Authority, get their sort of consent for the approach and their buy-in for the changes we were making to the scheme. The landowners and key stakeholders have the confidence in the approaches taken, and they feel that their interests have been taken into account. Managing the process between the different landowners was key to this, and ensuring each of them were kept informed and got as many of their boxes ticked as possible meant that the group as a whole stayed together for the consent. Having different landowners with competing problems can slow down approvals and applications. And it also developed a buildable scheme. We reduced the chances of program delay during construction, understanding how we're going to mitigate the made ground in the early days, how we're going to move forwards with various landowners and adoption issues. So this is the consented scheme. As you can see, it's a vast sprawling site split apart by very large areas of existing trees. Working around these was really important, ensuring that they are tied into the development and that the suds that you can see in blue are positioned suitably for drainage, but also amenity for the site. It was an interesting scheme and one that we really enjoyed working on and look forward to continue working on in the future. So key takeaways from today and what you should be doing differently going forwards. Investing early in gap analysis is so important. Understanding what you don't know is just as important as knowing what you do. Getting out on site, visiting the area with the client team, understanding what their vision is for the site, key constraints and things that you think you need to come and investigate further. Engaging with all the stakeholders and contractors early. Getting buy-in for anything you're looking to do that's very different from a consented scheme or possibly different from a standard they would normally hold you to, and getting contractors on board to ensure that the scheme you're putting forward is buildable and you're not going to have a surprise when you go out for tender. Reviewing drawings with the contractors pre-construction is really important, and just making sure that they have an understanding of what you're trying to deliver. And then being able to raise those questions before the time pressures of being on site are sort of realised, and agreeing clear and practical communication. That's from right at early stage of design work and flow of information between the design team, key stakeholders and the client team. And then when you get into construction, as Toby was talking about, a really detailed RFI process, what's important, what can wait, flagging things early so we're not having delays on site and cost overruns. So now we're open to questions. I think you can post questions in the group chat if you've got any. We're really interested to hear, and we've got a few minutes to answer those. Once we've answered the questions, our team will send out an email to everyone with our contact details. If you'd like to discuss anything further, please let myself or Toby know. We'd be happy to talk it through.